Welcome, everybody. My name is Bob Goodman. I'm the founder of Focus Strategy, and I'd like to welcome you to the Meet the Founder podcast. Focus Strategy is a consulting firm established to help startup founders reach their goals in an efficient and successful manner. And what I'd like to do now is introduce you to Dan Roda, who is the co-founder and CEO of Abaca, and he's going to be this week's Meet the Founder. So with that, hello, Dan. Welcome to the
Hey, Bob.
podcast. How are you?
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Doing good. How are you today?
Doing great. It's a little warm in Boulder today, but that's typical this time of year.
It's a little warm every day in Central Arkansas.
Yeah, I bet it is. So Dan Roda, as I mentioned, is the co-founder of Abaca, which is a fintech company. I first met Dan when I was managing director at Canopy Boulder, and Abaca was picked as one of the 10 startups out of about 300 applicants to join the Canopy Boulder's 16-week startup accelerator. So welcome, Dan. And as we start here, I was wondering if you could tell me a bit about your background and why you decided to enter the cannabis industry.
Sure. So I am an attorney by trade. I hope nobody in your audience holds that against me. Graduated from law school in 2008, the beginning of the last economic downturn, with the difficult mission at the time of wanting to get into real estate law. Ended up working for a law firm here in Little Rock, Arkansas, where I still live and where Abaca is based, primarily working with banks to unwind bad real estate transactions. Before, after a few years, I got to work on some good ones and worked in private equity for a few years after that. And in 2016, after Arkansas legalized medical cannabis, like any enterprising attorney, I saw an opportunity to begin doing application work. And so ended up representing a number of entrepreneurs in the state who were looking to acquire a license to either cultivate or process or dispense medical cannabis under the new state law. And unfortunately, we weren't successful in obtaining any licenses. One thing I did learn about during the process was the cannabis banking problem, which may be very familiar to some of your audience and maybe is a complete mystery to others. We'll get into that a little bit later on. But I realized this was a solvable problem. I had some of the background and skills, but was fortunate to know through the entrepreneurial community here in Little Rock, the guys who became my three co-founders who have very different and also very important skills for starting a company that is going to work in the banking and fintech and also cannabis space. And we got together and formulated a vision, started pitching banks, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Well, I think it's a pretty exciting space. Obviously, you know that very well. We're kind of still in the Wild West phase, but incredible potential coming up. And I think I've been really impressed with you and your team in the way you approach this solution and all you've done to close accounts and put in place systems and develop your process. So very impressive activity. Congratulations on getting the point where you are right now. What I'd like to do now is turn the screen over to you and let you talk more in detail about Abaca, and then we'll get into kind of how we can get some of the audience to perhaps provide some additional assistance. So with that,
great.
The stage is yours.
Great. Well, if I've pressed the right combination of buttons here, you should see my title slide here with the Abaca logo.
You're good
and
to go.
Our tagline there. Awesome. Yep. So the tagline is Cannabis Banking Solved. And when I talk about solving cannabis banking, I want to give you guys a little bit of context here on the problem. What I'm talking about is an industry that did $15 billion in legal sales last year, and it's projected to do over $50 billion this decade. And yet, as we sit today, less than 5% of the banks and credit unions in this country are serving the industry in any way. And in fact, that number is believed by many in the space, self included, to be somewhat artificially high, that the true number of financial institutions who are openly and widely accepting deposit accounts or engaging in other financial relationships with cannabis businesses is perhaps 100 or fewer. of the 15,000 or so in the United States, which is staggering, and it has resulted in the industry being very unbanked, but notably not completely unbanked. A narrative you often hear, especially in a state, a new state after they pass some form of legal cannabis, is that the industry is entirely unbanked and has to operate all in cash. And that's not the truth either. 26% is, on one hand, only a quarter of the industry that truly reports, as of a recent survey, being unbanked here in the U.S. When I say unbanked, I mean they don't have a bank account, but that is greater than the average, which is less than 10% in most states, and even less than that when it comes to businesses. And so there is a problem, and the problem is one of compliance, and it is one of reporting, because as cannabis is still an illegal substance under federal law with no accepted purpose according to the Controlled Substances Act. Even though many states have legalized it, it is still illegal at the federal level, and this creates a variety of regulatory complexities for banks that want to deal with it, and a significant regulatory risk and a whole lot of reports that they have to file. And we help our partner banks mitigate all of this with what we call the compliance engine. We tie into what they call seed to sale data in cannabis. This is the inventory tracking that is very robust in the industry, that tracks any plant metaphorically from seed until it is grown, cultivated, harvested, refined, and ultimately sold to an end customer. We are able to tie into all of that data, reconcile it with what we see in the bank account, build a market model and a business model there, which we are able to analyze and detect any suspicious activity, which we report to our partner banks and deal with as appropriate. And the compliance engine is what enables us to deploy our business model into the cannabis space, which is the fintech bank model. We did not invent the fintech bank model. There are fintech banks out there supporting verticals like the gig economy, or like the private landlord industry, for example, or there are even fintech banks out there like Chime that simply offer services to millennials and zennials who don't want to go into a bank branch, but still do need a deposit account and a credit or debit card to go make purchases. And so the way this works is that we, or Abaca, the fintech company, are the intermediary between banks that want to serve the industry and the customers who actually need their services. And we've built a great platform backed by some great partners that enables us to offer normal banking deposit accounts into the industry, as well as payment processing, and even some lending, which is another very difficult to obtain financial service for the industry. We're doing this today in these 8 states. The ones in lime green are where we have active customers, and we've just begun marketing to the ones that are more in teal there. We've got over 90 customers on the platform today using it for their daily banking and transaction processing needs. We've handled over 100 million in deposits for those customers and processed over 40 million in payments. And we're working with several large national operators in cannabis. They call them multi-state operators in this industry. And we're very privileged for that opportunity. I've got 3 great co-founders who, are, as I mentioned previously, have a variety of skills that I do not, and together we were able to make this happen, but we couldn't do it without our team. We're rapidly growing, but as of right now, there are 14 great people working for us, mainly in our home base here in Little Rock, although we've all been working remote for the last several months, as have most people. But we do have employees in Denver and in the Atlanta area as well. And, let me tell you and your viewers, listeners, whatever you call them, a little bit about the types of businesses that we serve. We serve your plant-touching cannabis businesses, which would be your cultivation facilities, your dispensaries, anybody who is actually handling product. We also serve what we call a Tier 2 marijuana-related business, which is an entity that does all or the vast majority of its business directly with those plant-touching entities. That would be a company like mine, or maybe a company that does packaging or grow supplies or something like that for the industry. And then there are Tier 3s who can potentially be anybody These are lawyers, accountants, even your air conditioning guy. Some banks will say that if that guy goes and does one repair job at one cannabis grow, he's a cannabis business and needs to stop working with that bank. On the payment processing side, it's also somewhat complicated. We're able to help hemp and CBD businesses accept major credit cards. In the industry, this can be a difficult service to obtain as well, with a lot of underwriting complexities that we've gotten pretty good at helping customers get through and that we're automating with our technology. In cannabis retail, the payments landscape is really very cloudy. You'll hear a lot of disagreement from a lot of people in the space as to what is legitimate or not. But we know what works and doesn't work, and we've seen a lot of things come and go, especially these gift cards and e-wallet solutions and other workarounds that come and go in prominence. And we shy away from that, from things that are legitimate, because right now, just like it's difficult for banks to work with the cannabis industry, the major credit card brands cannot do it either until we see a change in law. When it comes to the subject of a change in law, however, most folks in the cannabis industry are well aware that it's not a matter of if, but it's a matter of when, and it's really a matter of what type of change in law we get. There's been something that's been debated a lot over the past year called the Safe Banking Act, which would allow financial institutions to handle money from cannabis businesses under limited circumstances, but would not actually legalize cannabis. We don't think this goes far enough to get the major credit card brands or the big Wall Street investment banks into the industry. But a whole measure, something like the MORE Act that was sponsored by our new vice presidential nominee, Kamala Harris, would potentially have the effect of doing that. And so depending on what type of change in law happens for cannabis banking and the cannabis industry in general, we could see a variety of different possible futures here, but we know it's still going to be complicated. It's still going to be a high compliance industry. And there's always going to be a need for tech-driven solutions to help bring modern financial services to this industry, really to help bring it from the shadows into the light. And so, this would typically be the point in the presentation where I would take any questions. So, Bob, I am going to stop my screen share and turn it back to you.
Great. Well, let me give you some questions. That was really, really super. Congratulations on building and scaling your startup up. It's great to see those traction numbers. That's been watching that since the beginning, and it's great to see where you are. And obviously, you've got a solution it's a great opportunity for a very important space. So I'm a big champion of what you're doing. And please give my best to Greg, John, and Brian as well when you see them.
Sure will.
Can we talk a bit about the impact that the pandemic has had on the cannabis space in general, and then specifically on your business, and where do you think the industry is going after this pandemic is hopefully resolved?
Sure. There have been both positive and negative impacts for the cannabis industry, and there's some perhaps yet to be seen. But the most interesting thing to me is really kind of a funny juxtaposition in that cannabis remains illegal under federal law, right? It is a Schedule I controlled substance. However, under the laws of the vast majority of states this year, the cannabis industry was in fact declared essential during this pandemic, allowed to continue operating, and not just the dispensaries, but the entire supply chain. And so this shows just how far opinions have evolved and just how important cannabis is in the jurisdictions where it is lawful to have a cannabis industry, at least under state law. As a result of the industry being declared essential, of course, it hasn't seen the job losses that other industries have. And, when you talk just in terms of things people might stock up on if they're preparing to be at home for a long period of time, you got your toilet paper and you got your bottled water, and you probably went out and got some cannabis too. And so, for these reasons, the industry has performed very, very strong. And so as our customers have been very busy, we've been fortunate also to be very busy while working from home these last several months. But the long-term effects, that might be a bit more negative, or of course, if negative economic conditions persist, obviously that impacts everybody. And as the data shows, everybody's a potential cannabis consumer these days. So if everybody's affected economically, or a chunk of the population is, well, a chunk of your cannabis consumers are. So we could see some negative impacts there. The other negative thing that we've seen and will continue to see is in the passage of new laws in new states. A lot of states have a voter-sponsored ballot initiative process to get something on the ballot. That's how we got medical cannabis here in Arkansas, and there was a group trying to gather the required amount of signatures to get adult use on the ballot here this year. The same story here and in several other states due to the lack of large events and gathering of people in general. And other COVID-related complexities and concerns, they haven't been able to gather the signatures they need, meaning they haven't been able to get these items on the ballot. And so a lot of states that were poised or at least had a movement growing to get them to vote for medical or recreational cannabis on election day this fall were not able to get those things onto the ballot. And so, you will, however, see a lot of states and local municipalities struggling with budgetary issues. And so there will be a renewed push, I think, to start getting some of this done legislatively. So we'll see how it all works out.
Yeah, there's certainly a tremendous benefit in the tax revenues that could be created for states and local governments. So I agree with you. I think it's going to be helpful for the industry as states realize they have to find alternate mechanisms for generating revenues after this whole experience. And I've also heard, alcohol has been significant sales as well. So, it's hopefully we'll have a vaccine soon and all this will come back to normal and we will see. But
the economic effects have been interesting. We've been hearing of everything from hot tubs to RVs have been on back order across the country,
right?
As patterns change.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting also because of the way that the go to work kind of experience has changed. A lot more people are going to be able to do their work from their RV in Arizona or whatever they want to end up. So I think that's going to be a major change in general across the board. So.
Yeah, especially from areas that are high traffic and high real estate prices, they might lose a little of their luster.
Yeah.
And people will be looking to get out to nature and maybe just have an easier way of life. And we've seen these consumer buying patterns that may be temporary, but may become permanent, like a shift towards contactless payment, a shift towards home delivery or curbside pickup options.
Yeah.
And this is in all kinds of different retail contexts. Definitely, I'm speaking of cannabis here as well. A lot of, every state is different. A lot of states have begun to authorize delivery, curbside, that kind of thing in order to streamline and avoid contamination and exposure as another COVID-related safety measure. So are those temporary shifts? Will they become permanent? That's another thing that will be interesting to see.
Yep, we will see, and I will be tracking it as well. So your solution is really great. It's grown into a powerful banking tool specifically for the cannabis business. So you've been through a founder experience that I've been through many times as well. I was just wondering if you can speak a bit about that experience as you were building the current solution, and if you had any advice perhaps to other founders who are running the gauntlet like you've been doing as well.
One of the hard things is that raising capital, especially those early rounds, but perhaps I'll find out that this is all future rounds as well. It is an all-encompassing process. It is just about a full-time job. And as a founder, you have another full-time job, and that is running your company. And so balancing those two can be a challenge. And for founders who haven't raised capital before, I think many might not be aware how long it really takes, especially when dealing with VCs, just to get deals over the finish line. And if you let yourself get into a situation where it is not perhaps urgent, you might get pushed to the bottom of the pile there, which as an early stage company, every month that you survive, investment in you has become de-risked a little bit. You've perhaps grown a customer, achieved a strategic partnership, learned or done something that, if you are still there after that month, you're presumably improving in something. So every month that they can drag on that investment, they're de-risking it. And so these are things you need to juggle, especially as an early stage entrepreneur. But I guess the one piece of advice I could give is that however long you think it's going to take you to raise that capital, just go ahead and double it.
I agree. That's kind of the general, and it's actually not just in fundraising, but in a lot of other things like MVP development and other things. takes more time than you expect, which is why good planning, good strategy, good process is really important.
Absolutely.
Let's talk a bit about any special promotion. I think you mentioned that you were, when we talked earlier, that you were going to be looking at putting together a special promotion for new customers. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so something we're really excited to be launching is our social equity scholarship initiative. For those in the cannabis industry, the term social equity will register. For those who aren't, I will explain. This is an initiative in many states, and it takes a different kind of form and approach in different states. But the goal is to help minority and disadvantaged entrepreneurs get a leg up in the licensing and application process. And really the goal here is to help compensate for some of the past wrongs of the drug war over the last, several decades. And so the state of Illinois, one of the states where we operate, is poised to award a bunch of new licenses here in a few weeks. It's something that has actually been delayed throughout this COVID time period, but is expected imminently. And there was a very strong social equity component to the application and licensing process. And so we expect a bunch of these entrepreneurs who are awarded licenses, mostly first-time entrepreneurs, will fall into the social equity category. And they're entering an industry that is already very robust in that state, where they have a lot of very strong, very sophisticated competition. And so, we want to help those guys get started, really accelerate getting off the ground. And one of the issues is, of course, after they get their license, they need to get banking. And as we just discussed, that's difficult in this space. And I've got to imagine that it is even more difficult when you're a minority or disadvantaged entrepreneur without an existing network to help you get that done. And so we're going to come in and offer a scholarship to completely waive first-year banking fees for social equity applicants in Illinois who qualify. And anybody who wants more information on that can go to our webpage, goabaca.com, and check it out.
That's really good news. So again, it's goabaca.com is the way to reach out to you. As we wind down here, I was wondering, are there any specific things that you're looking for as far as help, support, resources from the audience that's going to be seeing this? And how can they best reach you if they have an interest? I guess the website is one way. Is there a central email that people can use to get a hold of you?
Yeah, I'm Dan at goabaca.com, and info at goabaca.com will get to all of us. And, we're hiring. We're a growing company. We're adding to our sales team. We're also adding to our development team. And, as COVID has made us realize, these positions oftentimes can be remote. So this is not just limited to people who happen to also be in Little Rock, Arkansas, which I imagine might not be too many of you viewers, though hopefully a few. And so, these are largely flexible remote work positions. If you know anybody who's got a passion for sales or business development, or IT or coding, and wants to work in the cannabis space, or already is and wants to advance in that space, we should be talking to them.
Okay, great. Well, Dan, I want to thank you very much for taking time to be part of the Focus Strategy Meet the Founder series. You can hang on here. I'm going to go to my slide and talk a bit about who Focus Strategy is. Our mission is to really help founders build strategy teams, attract investors, and accelerate growth. We've got tools that we use to help founders develop strategy, to help them build team, make sure they have a clear purpose, and certainly an effective process in place. We can also work on due diligence. So if you're looking at funding, we can help you get the due diligence all pulled together, and also introduce you potentially to some investors in the network. Bottom line is to accelerate growth. So if you're a founder and you need some help, my contact information is at the bottom there on the slide. And plan on seeing the next Meet the Founder podcast with Rami Sahar, who's founder and CEO of ClickMJ. I'm looking forward to putting that podcast together, and that'll be showing in a week or so. So back to you, Dan. Thanks again, And if anybody has any need or interest in also joining the podcast, please reach out to me. But Dan, have a great weekend, and stay safe and healthy.
Thank you, Bob. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Take care. Bye-bye.